Thank you, Dean Kanana, for your exemplary leadership of this institution and your humbling invitation to me to address the class of 2025. I also want to recognize Mr. Ken Raymond, undergraduate class of 1984, and as chairman of the Board of Advisors. Ken has been a steadfast leader and mentor on the board. His partnership with Dean Kanana has steadily improved outcomes in fundraising and the school's overall performance and reputation. Earlier this month, U.S. News & World Report released its annual rankings of colleges and universities. Smith ranked in the top 10 of 2 MBA categories and the top 20 of 3 others. Dean Kanana has raised the bar, and thus as our recognition goes up, so do expectations. So congratulations to our MBA graduating class of 2025 on this significant achievement. No doubt, yeah, you should clap for yourselves. No doubt, the first of many to come in your professional career, irrespective of what path you choose. Your achievements will follow from what you've learned here because of who you are. Expectations are powerful. Keep them as high as you go forward in your personal lives and professional journeys. One of the Smith School programs getting a top rating from U.S. News is for the online executive MBA. An accolade I know was well deserved based on my experience in the executive MBA program over a decade ago. After serving in the Defense Department as the Secretary of Defense's Special Assistant, I was hired by the Lockheed Martin Corporation, first in government affairs, and then in the aeronautics business, leading a part of the F-35 program. I entered the executive ranks with some financial experience from previously working in an investment bank after leaving the Army. But leading a P&L in the world's largest, biggest defense firm called for much more. Lockheed's expectations were for me to keep up, not catch up. I had a solid reputation and some solid repetitions in public service after years in the Secretary of Defense's office. But I still had much more to learn before taking on the role of Vice President of Program Operations for a $20 billion P&L and over 10,000 employees. This was a time when I looked forward to guiding the F-35 production program back on track and meeting obligations to our military customers and fulfill our duty to America's national defense. I was focused on advancing costs, schedules, and delivering a supersonic stealth fighter airplane. During my tenure, we stabilized the production costs of the aircraft, bringing it on par with the legacy aircraft in the U.S. military's inventory. This was due to an investment program I put in place to reduce costs for every facet of the production process. In 2 years, we were able to cut over $8 billion in costs out of the program. The Smith School gave me a set of tools I needed to deliver results for Lockheed. It also prepared me remarkably well for my next opportunity in the public sector, serving at the highest levels of the United States Army. Today, it's a privilege to share some of what I've learned with my fellow alumni of the Smith School. A few thoughts about your future, the environment you'll enter, the skills and traits you will need to succeed, and about expectations of what it means to be a Smith graduate. Earning one's bachelor's degree in business is certainly laudable, especially from this institution. However, MBA grads are not only expected to be skilled practitioners, but also future leaders in their fields. And from my perspective, based on experiences in college, private sector, the military, and the government, the fundamental expectations of leadership are consistent. Whether leading in public service, private sector, days gone by, or contemporary times. A book entitled Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten used to be pretty popular. In my case, I learned nearly everything I needed to know about leadership in the U.S. Army's 75th Ranger Regiment. Expectations of Ranger leaders are high. First rule of the Ranger Handbook is, quote, don't forget nothing. For a 23-year-old preparing for soldiers for combat, there was no better starting advice. Exhaustive preparation, attention to detail, not only saves lives on the battlefield, but it often makes a difference between an organization that thrives or fails in a competitive world. Many military and corporate leaders say they don't want to get in the weeds. A lot of times that translates to not wanting to do the work. I've learned the higher I move up the corporate ladder, the more I need to know of the priority details. It means knowing your stuff and knowing what you don't know. It means knowing what questions to ask without micromanaging. I saw this firsthand on Defense Secretary Robert Gates' staff during the military surge campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. Secretary Gates encountered a Pentagon which 6 years after September 11th still operated at a quasi-peacetime pace. But Secretary Gates expected more. Whether personally or through his staff, he would ask questions of the top brass and civilian executives that his predecessors may have thought were beneath their noise levels. To get priorities moving with the urgency he expected, Gates effectively made himself the DoD action officer for programs such as protective troop vehicles, battlefield medical evacuation, and intelligence and surveillance reconnaissance support. He readily acknowledged this modus operandi was not a long-term solution, but his expectations of a DoD at war were different. He exhibited a sense of urgency that bordered on fanaticism, because it's what he believed our soldiers deserved, and ultimately saved the lives of hundreds of soldiers over time. Keep your expectations high. Leaders don't get to be choosy about what activities may be below their pay grade, especially when lives and fortunes are at stake. All executive leadership is about decision making. Your people and your bosses expect you to make the decisions that are yours to make. Getting to ground truth, the details, help leaders make difficult choices amongst unpalatable options. But I've also found out that problems rarely present themselves one at a time. Over the past 2 decades, it's been amazing to encounter knowledgeable, highly experienced, or even brilliant people who just can't make a decision. It's usually linked to avoiding blame or diffusing accountability. Some of it's a personality trait. Some are simply more inclined to call the ball, the risk of being lonely, or accepting responsibility. I'm a Chicago guy, and Michael Jordan always expects the ball in his hands on the final possession of every game. I've observed government agencies and corporations alike that promote distorted incentives. People who make clear decisions are often blamed, and their careers damaged if things go wrong. Yet people who consistently punt responsibility can dodge blame for undesired outcomes, an inducement to avoid acting like with conviction whatsoever. You get the deeds you reward, not the ones you want. Change expectations. Make decisions. Reward decision makers. When I served as the Undersecretary and the Secretary of the Army, I took responsibility for a 1.5 million person organization, $180 billion budget, with vast portfolios that included human resources, maintenance, benefits, R&D investments. We found more than $30 billion in program cuts to free up money for higher priority efforts. To ensure not everyone agreed with the choices that were made, but they had to be made in order to prepare the Army for future combat that would be vastly different, as disruptive technologies provided adversaries opportunities to whittle away the total American dominance that we've witnessed since the end of the Cold War. We raised expectations, carefully explaining our rationale to soldiers, government officials, and private stakeholders. You can never underestimate the power of persistence. Quick example. When I started the executive MBA program in 2012, nearly all U.S. astronauts were transported to the International Space Station via foreign launch companies. It had been that way since the end of the U.S. Space Shuttle program. Every U.S. military satellite put into space was powered by a Russian-made rocket engine. The Lockheed-Boeing joint venture assembling the military rockets was the only domestic company available and did not manufacture engines. Along comes a brazen company named SpaceX. And at this point, try to put aside whatever personal feelings you have about Elon Musk for a couple minutes. SpaceX is building rockets in the U.S. with American-made engines for a small but growing list of commercial customers. Every so often, its rockets blew up on the launch pad in spectacular and embarrassing fashion. But they kept trying, and they kept learning. These guys had different expectations, free of government micromanagement, without government covering program development costs, the norm with traditional defense contractors. SpaceX had figured out a way to launch payloads in low Earth orbit at a far lower cost than the incumbent contractor. SpaceX's expectations were irreverently high, and the company went after them with pitiless intensity. At the time, the U.S. Air Force wasn't interested. The incumbent provider was considered expensive, but the military had grown comfortable going with a known quantity. The contracting terms were set to essentially guarantee the exclusion of SpaceX or any other non-traditional company. Then SpaceX does the unthinkable for a defense contractor. It sued the U.S. government for a chance to at least bid on the national security launch contract. In aerospace defense circles, it was seen as spitting in the eye of a $700 billion customer. But SpaceX eventually prevailed in court. It never flinched with its expectations of itself, for itself, and their desired outcomes. SpaceX then proposed and began testing another cost savings measure, namely reusing rockets from prior launches by guiding them from space and onto a floating pad in the middle of the ocean. It seemed almost as crazy as suing the U.S. government. And a decade later, the incumbent defense contractor, squeezed by an aggressive new competitor, the U.S. Congress, and world events, is now building engines in America. Military per-launch costs are way down, as the Air Force now has a choice of providers. And rockets can now be returned not just to an ocean vessel, but to the very same tower they launched from minutes earlier. Take a risk. Try something different that goes against conventional wisdom or the status quo. Then stay after it in the face of naysayers and obstacles. You get the outcomes you drive, not the ones you want. Finally, irrespective of the size or type of your organization, it is leaders that set the tone and bring the weather, the climate in which everyone else operates. As the leader, you have to listen, learn, and lead. Treat your teammates with dignity and respect. You set the example. You set the expectations. It's not all about you. Sure, your subordinates understand your expectations for the organization's climate. It's also not all altruism. It's practical. It's rational. Develop them, and they will earn more, sell more, produce more, create more, and compete more. The inverse is also true. Treat them poorly, and the best leave because they have options. Your climate is what you tolerate. What are your expectations? So no matter how your age or station, they'll take their cues from you on how to behave. From how you treat people who can't talk back. How you respond to stress, adversity, and setbacks. Do you play favorites or treat people equally based on the results they produce, based on their behaviors? How about based on their character? Never underestimate character. It's very different than personality. Personality can be charming or entertaining or popular. Character is about being trustworthy, thoughtful, mindful of others, and the determination to get the job done. So I'll wrap it up. Expectations are powerful. You have to ask yourself, what are your expectations? What details do you need to master? What decisions do you need to make? What obstacles do you need to persistently overcome? What climate are you building? You're loaded for life. You're armed with the skills gained here at the Smith School. And you should expect to be good teammates and good leaders. And I expect the best is yet to come for all of you. Same way it was for me. Congratulations, and thank you for having me.